Hello, folks. So I'm going to talk about Dreamweaver today. Basically talking about give you an introduction to Dreamweaver and how this kind of like works for everyday, like old-fashioned, well, I should say old-fashioned, basically raw, um, like web files. So in Dreamweaver, what we have is basically it's a program that's been around for a long, long time, and it's basically an HTML processor. All right, or I shouldn't say just HTML. It does work with CSS, PHP, JavaScript. It's basically kind of like a program editor, in the sense where we're actually working with program languages. However, if you're going to work with Dreamweaver, I have Dreamweaver open as you can see here. And what we're going to do is actually kind of like work with it a little bit more. So in this particular, when you start it up, there is a number of the different questions that it does ask you before you get to this screen. But before you start any InDesign project, instead of hitting create new, if you are working with a site or a website of some kind, you have to actually do one step first, and that is to actually create a new site. So it's not a new, but if you go up to the very top where it says site, and you click there and it says new site, basically it's going to give you this dialog box that gives you a option to go ahead and create a new site space. This is important when you're actually trying to link graphics and other files to everything and you need to maintain some kind of order. So the site name, basically, I'm just going to label it test. And I'm going to go find a local folder that I'm going to place this into. And, notice mine is set up with this different type of folders. So I'm actually going to go to where it says Web Construction Services, and I'm going to select that folder. And I'm going to go ahead, and you can also hit servers, and you can create a server, which basically if you go ahead and have like whatever kind of web host you have, you can set up what is called an FTP address, which is basically a file transfer protocol. It creates a connection between your computer and the actual site space that you're going to be dropping these files onto, because in a web world, all your site files are not housed on your computer. They're actually housed on a server somewhere, depending on where you have your hosting platform set up. So you'll more than likely get this information from whatever host company you have this set up with. So you can actually put in your information and you can hit save, and it'll create a connection to it where you can drag and drop your particular files into wherever you need to go. All right. But we're not going to deal with that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And basically, I'll be left with this particular document here, which I'm going to now work with. It gives a connection to a particular space that you're going to drop everything into. So if I go ahead now, I can hit create new, and you'll see that in here you can work with an HTML file, you can work with a CSS, SCSS, SAS, JavaScript, PHP, XML, SVG, and all these different types of things. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just start with a raw HTML file because I'm going to talk about all these different things that in Dreamweaver can do. All right, so with this all set, and I'm going to actually move this to the side. All right, where you have this particular screen, which gives you a preview of what the design looks like. All right, it is not the code, it's not that. And you on a website, you start a new file in. This is what you're going to actually see. So before I start anything, I'm going to go ahead and hit save as, and I'm going to drop it in here. And always the first page or the home page is always called index, which you can it's index.php, HTML, whatever it is always called index. So I'm going to give it a name, index.html, which you can kind of see up here on this right side in this particular box. You'll see .html. Now up here at the top, we got design, we got split, we got code. There are 3 different ways of actually seeing this document. If I hit code, this is what I'm going to see. It is full code of the space of the file that you're working with. There's also split, which gives you gives you the code view, and it also gives you the design view. All right. And this design view will give you this. Now, there are some benefits to using both. It depends on what you are actually trained to work with. So you might want to kind of like or figure out what you want to do. So in this sense, what I want to do is I actually want to go ahead and put in some wording. So I'm going to put in apple, and I'm going to hit return, oranges, grapes, and watermelon. Watermelons. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to call watermelon to be correct, grammatically correct. All right, if I were to highlight these things and I go down to the bottom, you're going to see that there is a properties box. It does say HTML, and there is also CSS, which we're not going to deal with right now. But HTML is there. Right now it's set to format to be a paragraph. If I click on that, you can set up things like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6. All right. In HTML language, there's only headings 1 through 6. Now, what's important about these is that heading 1 is set up as a default large text that's used for headings or titles. Heading 1 on a web page and SEO workings, heading 1 becomes one of the most important elements on the page. It will define what that page is about. All right. Heading 2 takes a secondary proximity. Third and fourth, fifth, and sixth, they go down the line as far as what their sizes are. And their sizes are dictated by a browser's cascading style sheet, or CSS. So every browser has a preset setting for many of these things, like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, paragraphs, all those type of things that can be defined in the browser properties. All right. So we're just going to leave it at paragraph for right now. And if I go over here, you're going to see that there's something called bold and italic. And you're going to see that here are list options like bulleted or numbered list. Shifting or shifts in that list are right here as well. So what I'm going to do is actually going to hit the bulleted list so you can kind of like see what's going on here. As code-wise, you see it's all set up with bulleted. I could actually hit numbered and do that if I want to. If I go to code, you're going to see what's actually happened, what it transpired. It actually wrote code for it. In HTML, it's easy to actually figure out HTML languages. Everything is surrounded around each other, much like an onion. Right? If you cut an onion open, you got a number of different rings around everything. All right, smaller ones are inside, but everything surrounds it. Much like this, if you got an opening list tag, it will end with a last or ending list tag. But also it will be surrounded by an unordered list or UL tag, ending with a UL tag. All right. So anytime you actually have HTML is kind of like this language that allows you to surround, or has code that surrounds things. All right, but to break away from that, I'm actually going to work with and tell you what's going on. In this first line, we have this doc type HTML, which is set up as HTML5. It's the HTML5 languages. Anything that is 4 or under used to have a much longer list of what that document was supposed to have in it. So that part used to be much larger. I used to have a lot more information in it as far as defining what version of HTML it is. And in this case, if you see just doc type and HTML, it is known as HTML5. Now, doc type is basically telling the computer when they open up this document, telling it what kind of type, what document type it is, and it's an HTML file. In the HTML file, it is surrounded by an HTML tag. So it will start with an HTML tag and it will end with an HTML tag. You don't swap those around. So if it starts with this, it'll end with this. Now you're probably wondering, it's like, okay, we have this onion skin mentality with HTML. Why doesn't this one end? Well, because that just defines what the document is. In some cases, there are going to be certain tags that do not follow that protocol. It will just have one tag and that is it. Okay. But for the most part, many of them do. They start with one and end with one. So this starts with an HTML and this ends with an HTML. Now there are two sections of an HTML document. One starts with head and it ends with head. This is called the heading portion of an HTML file. Anything that is between those two tags are not seen on the page. That is a spot where you actually put in certain scripts or programs that will actually run certain things on the rest of the page. So these are hidden elements on the page that are not seen per se, except for one that's actually right here. It's called title. All right, so a title is set up where this shows up in the browser window tab. And if you look at any browser and you look towards the top, you'll see a tab that actually has the words of what that page is. That is called a title. All right, so if you want to actually have some kind of title on the page, you would actually put that in there. Okay. This is the only thing that's really seen from the front end, but it is hidden in the head portion of the HTML document. Now, anything that is seen is put in between these two tags, body and end body. All right. So anything that is seen on the front page is going to be using those two tags. All right. So, what are some of the other tags that we kind of use? Well, one is the paragraph tag. All right. Paragraph tag will give me a certain paragraph and that is surrounded by a P. All right. So if I were to type out something here like, I love being, let's see. Since it is cold out, I would love it if spring would come early. Period. Okay. So that will show the document or that sentence right there. If I hit my split view, you can kind of see there it is right there. All right. It's just type that in. Now, oftentimes it's like HTML used to, in the good old days in the 1980s when the computers were becoming personal, people used to own computers in their home and that was a big thing. Most computers, and your phone, actually in some cases your watch held more power in a watch than it did for those computers in the 80s. Right? But when we had word processors, in order to actually make something like bold or italic, you had to surround it around tags. In particular, like right here, if I were to hit spring, I used to put a B tag, right? A B tag around this particular word. So it's like in spring, started with a B, ended with a B, and that used to bold it. If I go up here, you'll see that it did bold it a little bit. All right. Now that is an old version of the language. Now in standard HTML, B tag is no longer used, even though it is recognized in Dreamweaver and other platform or other browsers. It is not recognized. Instead, the B tag was actually replaced by the word strong. So if you were to surround your word and wanted to bold, you would actually use the word strong. Okay. All right. So now with early, of course, and again, in the old word processors, if you wanted to italicize something, you would surround it around an I. All right. So an I tag used to go around that word. So an I used to italicize it, which you can kind of see that actually happen here. Now in right now in standard HTML practices, the I tag is not really recognized. Instead, it is replaced with the word M, which is short for emphasis. So it's like if you surround that, you got the M and M. Okay. All right. So now what if you wanted to have let's say a bold spring, but you want to italicize it as well? Well, you can, again, thinking of the onion mentality, if you emphasize it, all right, where would I put my end tag? Would I put it before the strong or would I put it after the strong? If I put it before the strong, it would sometimes work. All right. Here, it actually did not work because what it did was it unbolded it, but then it put the tag right here, which tells me that it is out of order. Okay. So if I wanted it to be accurate, I would actually make sure that it is after strong instead of before. So the strong before, after spring, and then emphasis before strong and after strong. Using that, again, onion mentality when you're working with any kind of languages like this. Okay. All right. So like before body, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with those heading tags. If you remember what I talked about with the heading 1 through 6. So if I were to do H1, again, you notice that it would start, and Dreamweaver does a lot of this work for you. You would see where H1 starts, and then my blinking cursor is before the end tag. So I'm going to type out heading 1, and I'm going to hit return there. I'm going to do heading 2. I'm just going to call these out. And I'm going to go down here, heading 3. To give you an idea about what these are, heading 4. Okay, and I'm going to put my cursor after that, heading 5. And heading 6. Okay. So you notice that in the split view that did not show up. It will show up right now. If I'm writing in my code in here, it does not show up instantaneously at the same time. If I move my cursor up here and just click, you'll notice that it did put that in there right away. So this gives you an idea of like heading 1. This is what size it is. It does emphasize certain things. In search engine optimization, having heading in these particular documents, it is important to make sure that the search engine see what's important in a page. But you can kind of see is that there's heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That will determine what size they are. And these are predetermined things. Dreamweaver has a certain size for heading 1. If you go into Firefox, heading 1 is set to a certain size. Google Chrome, and all the other browsers that are out there, Safari. All right. And it will have a predetermined what size those headings are. So keeping that in mind when it does that. All right. Okay. So one of the other when I mentioned about certain elements. Now in HTML5 there are you can break certain things apart in an overall section of the site. Right now, you can there are certain tags that never used to be available when you were dealing with websites, and one is called a header. All right, and you may not notice this. This again works with CSS a lot more than it does with HTML, but there are certain things like header tags. There is like footer tags. And there is also like aside tags. which works with like side areas. And these tags primarily work with structure, not anything else. I think there's a content tab, all right, and that's being used a lot too. Okay. So overall, HTML has there's a lot of tags out there that you can actually utilize for your website to start with. This is the bare bones, bare structure of what a HTML site actually is. If you go to any website and you were to look at the background code, you'll notice that you can break down all the code to these simple structure elements on a web page. All right, so I'm going to stop right there, just so you can kind of get a good idea of what that all is about. I'll go into more HTML in the next video.